Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And welcome to Wednesday's edition to the DC Universe Daily Live. On today's show, I want to discuss what went wrong with the DCEU. What went wrong with the DCEU, first of all, was the disbandment of Christopher Nolan and Chris Terrio. Let me say that again. Chris Terrio. Let me start again. That's not a good start, is it? That's what happens when you go live, isn't it? I could have stopped this video if I was pre-recording it and start again. Anyway, let's go for it again. So, the first thing that went wrong with the DCEU was the disbandment of Christopher Nolan and David S. Goyer. Chris and David wrote Man of Steel. Chris and David wrote the story. David wrote the screenplay. This came from an idea from David Goyer while he had writer's block during The Dark Knight Rises. And so they come up with a pretty solid story, putting Superman within an alien invasion story. Interesting, right? So because that movie didn't even make 700 million at the global box office, Goyer and Nolan went away. They were blamed, while Zack Snyder was asked to stay and make the sequel. But WB didn't want to make a Superman sequel because they believed that Superman wasn't relating to audiences on his own. Of course, this wasn't the reason Man of Steel didn't make $1 billion. Man of Steel didn't make $1 billion because they had Superman, a friendly, fluffy, light-hearted character for children and families, into someone who snapped someone's neck, right? So that's why Man of Steel didn't have as much repeat business. And so the disbandment of Goyer and Nolan was the problem. That was problem number one. So they decided they wanted Batman and Superman in the same movie. But not only that, they wanted to call it Batman versus Superman. Kind of sounds like a WWE big price fight, doesn't it? Batman versus Superman. And their tagline was, who will win? Now, I can imagine the people at the time at the WB marketing department saying, oh, yeah, they're really going to go for this. And in a lot of ways, the marketing kind of worked because the opening was pretty much record-breaking, but so was the drop-off. General audiences didn't like the movie. And Batman versus Superman is the reason the studio went insane. And, you know, if we get into this, Batman versus Superman is a movie that I love, but it's also a movie we could have done without. Let's talk about the marketing a little bit. The marketing tried to represent Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice as a fight between Batman and Superman. But in fact, that isn't really what's at the heart of the movie. What's at the heart of this movie is that Superman is embracing his father's dream of him being a superhero, while Lex Luthor is manipulating Batman and Superman into hating each other. So there's a lot going on in this movie. They introduced Wonder Woman. They do really quick introductions into the rest of the Justice League, Aquaman, Cyborg, The Flash. And I think that was another problem for general audiences. The way those other three characters were actually introduced was kind of problematic for people as well. This movie is an indie superhero movie, a very expensive indie superhero movie, and it broke what they were planning from the beginning. We now know that James Gunn and Peter Safran are planning a Bible. The DCEU never had a Bible. People say to me, yeah, but Snyder had a huge slate. Yes, he had movie titles with good artwork to them, but I don't think there was, a ready-made Bible for that franchise. I do believe, despite saying what I'm saying, that if the studio didn't interfere with Snyder, I think if they allowed Goyer and Nolan and Snyder to work together, the DCEU wouldn't have been broken, and I wouldn't be doing a live video about what went wrong with the DCEU. But even when they got rid of, like, Goyer and Nolan, even if they allowed Snyder to do what he wanted to do, I think things would have ended up a lot better. Not perfect, not what they wanted in terms of box office, but a lot better than they did. Zack Snyder brought on comic book writer, Wonder Woman comic book writer, Alan Heinberg, and they plotted out a Wonder Woman movie, a really good Wonder Woman movie that ultimately did very well at the box office and most people loved. There's not many DCEU movies where you can say the general audience all loved it, everyone came together and enjoyed it. A rarity for this franchise. So I'm assuming that Zack Snyder would have done the same for the Flash movie and the Cyborg movie, which is what he was planning. So he probably would have got a Cyborg comic book writer to write that movie with him and a Flash comic book movie writer to write that movie alongside him. So we'll never know if Zack Snyder's plan would have worked better without any interference, or if Zack Snyder's, Christopher Nolan's and David Goya's plan would have worked really well without studio interference. We'll never know because Christopher Nolan and David Goya were disbanded. I believe it would have ended up a lot better. But ultimately, they threw those plans out. They threw Goya and Nolan's plan because David Goya had a plan for a direct Man of Steel sequel that involved the Codex and continuing that storyline, probably maybe with Brainiac. Again, we'll never know. They disbanded these ideas. BVS came out. It had mixed reviews. It had a mixed reaction, and it only made 150 million at the box office. Yes, that's not a lot of money for a film with Batman versus Superman and around a budget of 300 million. And God knows what the marketing cost, because there was a huge marketing drive. Basically, the marketing for BVS was wrong. They pretended to be a popcorn chomping movie for the general audience when they were doing something deeper. When Logan was marketing, it was basically very honest about what it was doing. It was dark. It wasn't necessarily for the general audience. They didn't lie. They weren't embarrassed about what the film was going to be. But WB were embarrassed of what the film was going to be. Now, they cut half an hour from Zack Snyder's movie, which didn't help the situation because the movie then, with bits missing from it, confused the audience. Now, again, if they originally let out the 3-hour movie, maybe people would have been less confused, but I still believe people would have been triggered in the direction they went in. Batman versus Superman is simply not a film for the general audience. And that's where the problem started. Then they decided to do a Suicide Squad movie, which basically in David Ayer's cut was going to hint towards the Justice League plan, but it was going to tell its own Suicide Squad-y kind of story. But they interfered with that movie. So that's 2 movies now they interfered with. And then there was Wonder Woman that worked that well. Then they sacked Zack Snyder. Zack tried to do 3 or 4 treatments of his and Chris Terrio's script to please the studio. Didn't work out. They got rid of him. And they brought in, look, you know the story. They brought in Joss Whedon. So what happens is here, each attempt to make a good movie doesn't work out for one reason or the other. Man of Steel, Superman breaks someone's neck. BVS was very indie. It wasn't the film people expected to see. They got 9 minutes, right? The title card is Batman versus Superman, and you've got 9 minutes of a fight. Because there's loads of, look, you know, we all know what should have happened after Man of Steel. Because the issues with Man of Steel could have been easily fixed. The complaints about Man of Steel were it had too much action and things like that. And, you know, with Superman Returns, people complained there wasn't enough action, right? So there was lots of destruction. A lot of people and the critics didn't like the amount of destruction. Things were being destroyed. Superman, you know, him and Zod go into the petrol station, it blows up. There would have been people who died. You know, critics and a lot of fans didn't like this. But the movie ends quite well. I mean, the third act's a bit messy. We must say that. But ultimately, he's at the Daily Planet with his glasses, ready to go. Shares a little bit of fun with Lois Lane and the other people working at the planet. So you expect the sequel to be a little bit lighter and really be a Superman movie we expected in the first place, because Man of Steel isn't the Superman movie we expected in the first place. Now, I love Man of Steel, but it does have issues. So there's nothing that happened in Man of Steel that couldn't have been fixed in a Man of Steel sequel. The next film should have been a Batman movie. Zack Snyder clearly is obsessed with The Dark Knight Returns. Why couldn't he have just adapted The Dark Knight Returns? It doesn't make sense. Hey, instead of Batman versus Superman, right, Ben Affleck wanted to do his own movie. Why couldn't it have been Batman versus Deathstroke, right? Which, that's the villain who was going to be in Ben Affleck's movie. So you needed a movie for this older Batman. And in fact, he wanted to do a darker, older, bitter, twisted, grizzled, gritty Batman. So The Dark Knight Returns would have been the perfect vehicle for Ben Affleck. And if he wants to write and direct it and star in it, fine. And so this was a problem. It should have been a direct Batman movie, but they wanted just to, they wanted a crossover without earning the right for a crossover. Superman was just introduced, so surely you have to introduce the other characters. Some people say, well, we don't want to copy the MCU. It's not about copying anyone. Introducing each character in their own movie makes sense. And it's common sense, and they didn't use common sense. So after they lose Snyder, after Justice League, basically, they're trying to dig themselves out of hole after hole. After Justice League, the release the Snyder Cut campaign really starts, but we get Aquaman, a really, really good comic book movie that makes over $1 billion, great reviews. Not everyone liked it, but it did really well. It's the only DCEU billion-dollar movie, and that's directed by James Wan. So instead of trying to get Wan involved more wholeheartedly into the franchise, we then get Shazam. Now, Shazam pretty much was already planned. So, Walter Hamada's here now. So we've gone from Zack Snyder. Then we had Jeff Johns and John Berg. They got rid of them after Justice League, understandably. And then we had Walter Hamada. Walter Hamada would be the final leader of the DC Extended Universe, the DCEU. So people reacted to Shazam really, really well, but it did make a paltry, 300 million or just under 400 million, around the money that ultimately Black Adam will end with. So the box office was low, but it cost just under 100 million to make, and with the marketing and everything. So that's why Walter Hamada is now working at Paramount, because he's basically a producer who can bring in good movies at low budgets. And so that's why Walter Hamada was brought on to run the DCEU. So Shazam worked out kind of okay. Then we have Birds of Prey, which was a disaster because they allowed Margot Robbie to do whatever she wanted. So that was a problem. And then we got Wonder Woman. So we had what? What was it? Yeah, it was Birds of Prey. Then it was Wonder Woman 84, which again, they allowed Patty Jenkins to do whatever she wanted. But Hamada could see the film was going to be a disaster, and he wanted her to cut certain things from the movie, and she wouldn't. They allowed her and Margot Robbie to do whatever they wanted with their films, and it went wrong. This was another mistake, letting people do whatever they want. Kevin Feige is the president of DC Studios. Sorry, not DC Studios, I'm dreaming, right? If only. No, Kevin Feige is the president of Marvel Studios, right? He's the one who makes the decisions. He is the showrunner, and he's the one directing the director and coming up with the stories, one story spanning a whole franchise on streaming and cinematically. He's in charge. No actor is in charge. No director is in charge. It's him. He's the boss. He steers the ship. That's why it's always worked. With the DCEU, I don't know who was supposed to be in charge when Snyder was running things in terms of narratively. I suppose Snyder was kind of the president of DC Films then. They definitely didn't have one at first. Then it was Jeff Johns and John Berg. Then it all went wrong. We went away from Snyder. Then we went to Hamada. So Wonder Woman 84 and Birds of Prey, absolute disasters. And then James Gunn got fired by Disney, and they did a very clever thing and went and brought him in. He could have had any movie he wanted. He wanted the Suicide Squad. He did the Suicide Squad. It was a great movie. Again, a DCEU movie fails at the box office day and day. Look, I can give you many reasons why that movie failed. It's not about excuses here. The facts that will always be remembered is a really good, great movie that didn't do well at the box office. But then he got to do Peacemaker, another great project. And again with Black Adam, a pretty solid, entertaining movie, but again, no good at the box office. And you can't blame COVID this time. At least James Gunn can blame COVID and Day and Date for the failure of his movie. But The Suicide Squad is a great movie at the end of the day. And so here we are with the DC Extended Universe, and it's failed because, first of all, they had this kind of idea from David Goyer. Goyer goes, Snyder comes in, well, Snyder's there from the beginning as a director. They implement his vision. Snyder goes, Berg and Johns come in. This is when they try and dig themselves out of the Snyder situation. Instead of coming out, Snyder and Johns and Berg coming out and saying, look, we've had creative differences, hasn't worked, we're going to start again. So even before Justice League, after BVS, they should have said, in fact, after Suicide Squad, because things were being done back to back in a hurry to try and catch up with Marvel and Disney, after Suicide Squad didn't work out, like, I suppose, like the reactions, if you like, critically, it didn't work out critically, they should have said, right, we're parting company with Snyder, we're starting again, right? You know, Johns and Joss Whedon could have come up with a new franchise together, which probably would have worked commercially, because the DCEU under Snyder simply didn't work commercially. Whether you love him or hate him, it didn't work commercially. And when you've got this huge IP, it's got to make money. It's got to go beyond making bank. You know, they want terrific returns for this huge IP. You know, they wanted $1 billion for Man of Steel, $2 billion for BVS. That's not overreaching. That's exactly what these movies should be bringing in. And when you do things properly, like Spider-Man No Way Home, which is part of a franchise that's been going on for many, many years and earned the right to do Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home is a brilliant film in terms of, even though it's bringing in two iconic previous Spider-Men, it focuses on that universe's Spider-Man, and it tells his story and sets up kind of a new origin story for him. And it all kind of finishes on tragedy over triumph. And it leaves everything hanging for the next movie. I think Spider-Man No Way Home, in terms of modern day superhero comic book movies, is pretty perfect in its narrative and the way it's executed. So then Walter Hamada decided he was going to do a multiverse strategy. They were trying to find a way to get away from the Snyderverse. So they decided via Flashpoint and the Flash, they could create a new timeline. So instead of actually just starting again, right, they wanted to overcomplicate matters with a multiverse strategy. Now, at first, I was really excited about this. I thought, yeah, this could really work. Everything that's ever been DC would be canon, which is exciting. They were bringing back Michael Keaton. But then I heard they wanted to make Michael Keaton an actor in his 70s as the main Batman. But Ben Affleck was going to be involved in The Flash. Still is, as far as we know. And so Supergirl was going to replace Superman because they didn't want to work with Cavill. Then they told us they were doing a Black Clark Kent, and it wasn't received very well. That's been and gone now. And so although a multiverse strategy could be exciting, it basically became messy because Ezra Miller, their lead star who plays the Flash, started misbehaving. And so they started delaying movies and, you know, nonsense like that. They announced 4 movies for this year without many movies in 2023. Again, no forward thinking. So anyone who actually thinks the DC universe, the DCEU ever had a Bible is living in fucking La La Land. It never had a Bible under Goyer and Nolan. It never had a Bible under Snyder. It didn't. We had a slate. I mean, he did have a slate because after MOS, BVS, Suicide Squad, they were going to do Cyborg, The Flash. You know, obviously they did Wonder Woman. And BVS should have obviously been a Batman movie, a Batman standalone movie. Probably either the one that Ben Affleck wanted to do with the Batman movie or a Dark Knight Returns adaptation, basically directed by Zack Snyder. That's what he was attempting to do anyway. So I never really understood why they didn't just adapt The Dark Knight Returns and all this Batman versus Superman nonsense. I don't know where it came from. That was the studio. They wanted Batman and Superman in the same movie, where The Dark Knight Returns does it in a better way. And it's a really interesting film. Dark Knight Returns, older, bitter, twisted Batman, right? And it tells a great story. Ben Affleck would have been perfect for that because they wanted an older, gritty Batman. What were they messing about with Batman versus Superman and Batman going for a whole movie where he's planning to kill Superman? Doesn't make sense, really, does it? And then you've got the whole Martha moment, which could have been interesting if it was actually executed in the right way. I don't think the idea is bad. It's always I always say this in terms of stories and movie making, right? Because I've been writing stories and performing them since amateur dramatics when I was younger. I used to go to amateur dramatics every Thursday night down Croydon in the UK. And, we just used to make shit up on the stage with each other. We used to just, come up with shit. Nobody knew what the other one was going to do, right? It was improvisation, which I've always been quite good at, even if I do say so myself. But it's always about execution. The DCEU was never executed because it never had a real plan. But then when Snyder was fired, he started talking about this 5-movie arc: Man of Steel, BVS, Justice League 2. Now, originally, Justice League and Justice League 2 were part of the original slate. But Snyder started talking about a third Justice League movie, which had never been publicized before. But suddenly he was saying he always planned for a Justice League trilogy. Interesting. Snyder was clever enough to come up with these things to get the fans excited and really fight to release the Snyder Cut. And so there was a slate there, as I say: Man of Steel, BVS, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Cyborg, The Flash, and I think the first Justice League movie. Then we went from 2 Justice League movies to 1 Justice League movie. And I think at the time, look, there was a time when this franchise first started where I was very defensive. Zack Snyder's the best. Like a lot of these fans, yeah, it's different, it's unique, blah, blah, blah. People should be lapping this up. And as I said on the top of the show, I think if they left Goyer, Nolan and Snyder alone, maybe something better could have been worked out. When Goyer and Nolan went, which they shouldn't have gone, by the way, but we were left with Snyder. If they left him again to his vision, things would have probably ended up slightly better. I don't think the box office would have ever been what the studio wanted, and also the reactions would have been divisive, and people would have been split over Snyder, because Snyder's films have always divided audiences. I think the only Snyder movie everyone kind of said, wow, that's good, and that's 300. I don't remember anyone getting upset about 300, probably because even though it is from a graphic novel, it's not really one that people, had really, an opinion of the way it should be. When you're dealing with Superman and Batman, you can't mess around with those characters. They've got to be what your imagination believes they are. Matt Reeves gave you a Batman, the greatest detective, a young Batman who's actually Batman. He absolutely feels like Batman. He's doing Batman things, right? And he's at the beginning. His Batmobile doesn't exactly look like the Batmobile because he's at the beginning, right? His costume doesn't exactly look like the Bat costume. Everything's kind of, it's a thing in progress, isn't it? And that's what it is. So the Penguin isn't really the Penguin yet, because basically, one of the things is that, Colin Farrell's Penguin is embracing the gangster side of the character. He's not actually trying to be a penguin. The Penguin's a nickname they come up with him, right? So you've got kind of a version of Joker, who is a work in progress, of course. So you can't mess around with Batman and Superman. And Goyer, Nolan, and Snyder messed around with what Superman and Batman are in the public's imagination. And this is where it went wrong. You can't remake the Earth with Batman and Superman. People have opinions, right? Now, yes, people are always going to have different opinions. There's always people who have different opinions about different iterations of Batman and Superman in comics, television, and film. But what Goyer, Nolan, and Snyder were attempting to do was remold the clay. And you can't do that with those people, with those characters. So basically, after Snyder went, they were literally, Snyder had created a crater, And then Berg and Johns and Hamada were digging one even worse. They didn't want Cavill anymore. They didn't want this anymore. They wanted a multiverse strategy. And everything they were doing was just making the situation worse, because anyone, not just me, but anyone could have said to them, it didn't work out with Snyder. Start again now, right? So we went from, Johns and Berg. Johns and Berg could have said, let's start again. This is a fucking mess. No, Hamada comes in. Oh, he could have said, let's start again. No, he wanted to do a multiverse strategy and go into a new timeline without Superman and have a black Superman in a different universe. Have, Affleck stuck in another universe. Have Robert Pattinson's Batman in another universe. This is why Zaslav said yesterday he doesn't want 3 or 4 Batmen. Because why do you need 3 or 4 versions of one character? These are things you have to earn the right to do after several years. So now in the MCU, we've got 3 Spider-Men, right? Because they've been around for a long time, the MCU, and they've established the right to do these things. Spider-Man No Way Home is a really, really good film. I don't care if you like the MCU or hate the MCU. I can leave it or embrace the MCU. It doesn't bother me. But I was rewatching Spider-Man No Way Home today. It is such a good film. And I have criticisms of Feige in the MCU, but that film is so good. And they've gone quiet on Spider-Man ever since, because they're clearly having big discussions on what to do with him next, because they realize how important Spider-Man is. Spider-Man and Superman are very similar, not in terms of characters or their origin stories, but they're both as iconic, and they really are American mythology in a lot of ways. And so you can't mess around with Spider-Man. So they haven't messed around with Spider-Man. Whatever Spider-Man film you look at, in terms of who he is as Peter and as Spidey, he's always the character you read. Some of the films may be different. Maybe some of the films you were disappointed in. But Spidey is always Spidey. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, 2 brilliant actors. Tom Holland, what's a performance in Spider-Man No Way Home? That is his movie. A young British actor nailing it, having actors and artists like Zendaya and Jon Favreau, amazing. It really is a great movie. I really like it. And it's definitely the best movie in Phase 4. So dceu didn't want to earn the right to do these things. It wanted to change. It started off with Snyder, Goyer, and Nolan trying to do something a little bit with nuanced, right? And then all the audience didn't go for it, right? And then we went from that to people trying to cheat the way to the top. Justice League is about, we don't want to spend any more money on Justice League. We just want to slap some color, slap some smiles, and hope for the best. It's really amazing when you look at some of the comics Jeff Johns has written that he didn't get. The Justice League plan would never have worked. You're rushing something. That film should never, ever have been released. It's a disgrace. It's embarrassing. And you have to look at the Snyderverse as this. Either you like it or you don't. But as a studio, you have to say, we have to go with it till he's finished. Or let's just say to the public, this hasn't worked out. Let's be honest with the public. This hasn't worked out, and we're starting again. We hope you enjoyed Man of Steel. We hope you enjoyed Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, and at that time, it should have been stopped. Even before Justice League, it should have been stopped. But if you don't stop it before the Justice League thing, surely you've had the knock on the head to understand that Justice League is giving you the slack that you deserved, and you should just start again. You've got Whedon there. You've got Jeff Johns there, right? 2 of the greatest minds in comic book storytelling, right? Whedon wasn't successful with Buffy and Angel and other stuff by accident, right? Whedon is a clever man, but not even Whedon could have saved Justice League, because the poor man was, he was faced with a cast and crew that didn't want him there. They wanted the original director there. So poor Joss Whedon was being attacked by the cast and crew. Then he started getting nasty with them. And as I've always said, everyone's happy to blame Joss Whedon for the whole situation. Everyone was to blame for that situation. It goes to, Kevin Tsujihara, Jeff Johns, John Berg, all of them. All of them were to blame. The cast, the crew, Joss Whedon. But there were many times within the DCEU where they should have started again, right? Once they realized Snyder wasn't working out for them, they should have just admitted it and said, right, let's start again and do something comic book accurate. Basically, they should have started again and done exactly what James Gunn and Peter Safran are doing now. But of course, I'm talking about starting again, but is this what James Gunn and Peter Safran are doing? This is what we don't actually know right now. So there's many things that went wrong with the DC Extended Universe, whether it's Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, the Suicide Squad, Justice League, and it just went on. And then you had two more. And then basically, whoever's been running this thing from the very beginning was making the wrong moves. They didn't look, I'll tell you why Arrowverse was so successful at the beginning in Arrow seasons 1 and 2 and Flash seasons 1 and 2. And, some of the stuff they did going forward did actually work. The reason it actually worked, and I'll explain to you, right, is because, Greg Berlanti looked at Smallville, looked at what Alan Miles did with Smallville. They took that blueprint, they took it on. That's why it worked, right? DC and WB wanted to be as successful as Marvel and Disney with the MCU, but they didn't look at what they did with the MCU. It's not about copying it, it's looking at the formula. Why does the MCU work? Why, Joss Whedon wrote and directed, Avengers Assemble. So you've got to give him credit for that. We can't change history. Callas, like using Doomsday and doing Death of Superman 2 movies in. Yes, Callas, that was a mistake. As I say, Callas, you're right, but there were so many mistakes. And should I tell you the biggest sin in life, your everyday life, or in your job? If you keep on making the same mistakes again and again. So let's talk about this Doomsday thing. First of all, it's not even the real Doomsday. Snyder admits it's not even the real Doomsday. Why are you doing something that's not the real Doomsday? Let me ask any comic book fan who's not necessarily watching now, but maybe looking back at this video, and let me ask you a question. Can anyone do a better story than the death of Superman and the story of Superman Lives, right? Basically, we see him in his pomp with the Justice League, with Lois, everything's well, and then him and Doomsday kill each other. Then, to bring him back, just listen, if you don't know the story, it's great. Nobody could do a better story than this. They then have different versions of Superman, and then ultimately, in the end, Superman rises from the dead. It's such an epic fucking story. And for Zack Snyder to think he could do that story again his way, and he could think he could make it work, and he had the idea to have a Superman rebirth story within a Justice League movie. I've said this many times. That was a mistake. Rolo, Reign of the Superman. Exactly. Even the animated, we've had two versions of the Death of Superman in animation, and both were great. But the one that they did back to back, and in fact now they've joined them as one movie, is the Death of Superman and the Reign of the Supermen. And it's so good, right? Animation, Bruce Timm's animated universe has always done better than anything the DC Extended Universe have done. So what Callas says there is right. But that's not just that. It's lots of things. So you create a Doomsday. That's not even Doomsday, right? You create a Doomsday who doesn't really look like Doomsday. Ultimately, he has some bones sticking out in the end, but it's not the Doomsday. He admits it's not the real Doomsday. You're doing a DC Extended Universe, right? One day in 20 movies in, you may want to kill Superman off properly. Why did you do it in the second movie, right? The character wasn't established, right? Now, again, it's about execution. You could probably get that right if it was executed better. Callas, also, as I said before, the casting of an old Batman was a mistake. Batfleck is awesome, but it wasn't the right time for an older Batman, especially when Clark was young. Right, I spoke about this earlier. I don't know if you were here, Callas, but I said, you needed to do a standalone Batman movie. Now, there's so many different things they could have done. They could have, literally, Snyder's obsessed with The Dark Knight Returns. He implemented certain Easter eggs from The Dark Knight Returns. That second movie could have been The Dark Knight Returns. Older, grizzled, bitter Batman. Exactly what Ben Affleck's Batman is in BVS. that it could have been literally an adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns. Yes, then an older Batman would have worked. But you're right. Why would you want an older Batman? Why would you want to miss all the great things Batman's experienced in the comic books? You know, the Bat family, you know, lots of different, you know, villains, you know, the death of Jason, all of it, right? Red Hood. Why would you want to skip all of that and have that happen off screen? So you're all right, you know, they could have had a younger Batman grow into being an older Batman eventually. That could have been the art. Yet none of it made sense. And that was about Snyder's obsession with The Dark Knight Returns, but he could have actually adapted that comic book. So it's all terribly mystifying. The problem is for Snyder, he wasn't in control of everything. The studio wanted a Batman and a Superman movie, calling it Batman versus Superman like a WWF, WWE prize fight. It was absolutely ridiculous. Callis, then why not just do Dark Knight Returns movies instead of a Trinity Origin movie? Well, it's no good asking me. These, you know, basically they wanted a Batman and Superman movie because they thought they'd make double the cash. And it didn't work out because of the way the movie was. Because they said to Snyder, probably you can't do a Dark Knight Returns. We want Batman and Superman. But the Dark Knight Returns actually does have Superman near the end, right? So, they could have still done that, but they didn't want that because they didn't understand, and that's the problem. So Snyder tried to do Dark Knight Returns within a Batman and a Superman movie, which was never going to work, and Death of Superman at the same time. Callis, I want to see Superboy and Con-El and Supergirl before we do Death of Superman. Basically, whether it's Batman, Superman, Plastic Man, there's so much great meat in these characters' stories. This is why James Gunn is perfect. He's used to making lesser-known, graded characters relatable. And he's going to fill out this universe. You can't run a universe just on Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. You need to populate this universe. And I've just recorded a video about that, which I will be uploading after this one. So when we talk about the mistakes, what went wrong with the DC Extended Universe, it's not just one thing. It goes from Zack Snyder to Johnson Berg to Walter Hamada. Mistake after mistake after mistake when they should have just started from fresh, right? When Snyder went, they should have started again. When Berg and Johns went, they should have started again with Walter Hamada, but they didn't do that because it was always about not building something from the ground up, but cheating. They tried to catch up Feige and Marvel. The problem was Feige and Marvel built from the ground up. They created their own studio. It was then bought by Disney, and that was after the franchise was already established. So they fought it through, and WB wanted to cheat its way to the top. Kalashia, I don't get why they clung on to Snyder's faulty legacy when it clearly didn't grab audiences. Well, they wanted to get away from it, but they tried to cheat their way into getting away from it. They didn't want to build from the ground up. This is why they did Justice League, right? They thought, we already spent the money. Let's just try and fix this train wreck. And Zack Snyder's Justice League isn't a train wreck, but it's a very different movie. Rolo, the problem with Snyder is that he took his favorite moments from DC Comics and compiled them together. Both Death and Superman and Dark Knight Returns take place at an experienced point, not early. Yeah, listen, if you want to do Death of Superman, you've got to adapt the comic. If you want to do Flashpoint, again, Hamada didn't adapt Flashpoint. It's literally just an excuse to rebirth the DC Extended Universe timeline. They don't even care about that graphic novel. They've, cut out things from the comic that are so intrinsically important. And they're not interested. The only reason they even thought about doing the Flashpoint story was to try and jump into a new timeline. Again, jumping into a new timeline and, basically making everything in DC live action's history canon because it's laziness. Let's throw Michael Keaton in there. All the Muppets will love that. Yeah, Michael Keaton, as some people are saying now. It's laziness, right? Let's chuck Brandon Routh in there. Let's chuck Grant Gustin in there. It's laziness. And they've been lazy from the very beginning, where the Marvel Cinematic Universe was built from the ground up. The studio was built from the ground up. And even with phase 4 not being as good as the first 3 phases, it still works as a franchise. The world building is happening. Kang is coming. Ronnie Dodge, morning, my friend. Morning, Ronnie. Good morning. We're talking about what went wrong with the DC Extended Universe. And as I've been saying, many things went wrong. And I think, hopefully, when James Gunn and Peter Safran came in 6 months ago, they did look at the DCEU and the mistakes and not try and repeat those mistakes. It looks like they're building out from the ground up, which I think is very, very important. So, hopefully this is what they're going to do. You've got to earn the right. I mean, no one's been able to replicate the success of the MCU because nobody understands what the MCU have done. It's a movie series using the television series concept. That's what it is. It's a continuing saga. You can bring in these characters are all part of the universe. And it looks like this is what Gunn and Safran are attempting to do. If you do it properly and you earn the right to do it, basically the Marvel Cinematic Universe earned the right for the crossovers after Avengers Assemble. Ronnie Dodge, I feel Rob could become the DCEU Batman. Well, that's the $1 billion question. We simply, who knows? Callus, exactly. Ronnie Snyder tried to do Dark Knight Returns and Death of Superman in the same movie. The third one in the franchise at that. Ronnie Dodge. Oh, sorry, Ronnie, I missed a comment. They rushed it too quickly. Yeah, as I say, that's part of it. That's the vital thing. They didn't build anything up. They were just throwing things at the wall and saw what stuck. The only thing that stuck early on, literally, was Wonder Woman. The rest of them didn't stick, right? I think what's good about Patty Jenkins, she can ground a film. Wonder Woman 84 isn't great, but I think maybe the mixture of Jenkins, Heinberg, and Snyder kind of worked in the end. And I think by Jenkins deciding to move totally away from Snyder, that hurt what she was attempting to do. Short Circuit, but I loved the darker version which Snyder did. Yeah, but you need a franchise, Short Circuit, that does it all. You need a franchise that has rated R movies, that has kind of movies for children, movies for families, lighter movies, darker movies. You need a franchise with a bit of everything. But darker stuff isn't going to work for the commercial audience. Commercially, that's not going to work. They are a business, Short Circuit, not your charity. Callus, Superman shouldn't be darker. I agree. Callus, exactly, Mick. And then 1984 came. And they're still talking about, if this new leadership allows Jenkins to come in after that, then my faith in them has gone. It's as simple as that. Callus, Batman can be dark and sell. Batman can be dark like Matt Reeves did him, that kind of dark. But when you've got him killing people and, going to as dark as he did in BVS, people ain't going to buy that because Batman may be a darker character, but he isn't as dark as some people actually see him as. Ronnie Dodge, Wonder Woman was good because it was like a Captain America movie where she was the first member of the League. Yeah, exactly. And she worked and it was a really good film. Who knows who I should give credit for that movie, but it's a really good movie. I don't know, right? But at the end of the day, the inconsistency that David Zaslav spoke about when he first came in is there for everyone to see. Couldn't run a piss up in a brewery. Callus, Superman can't what? Short Circuit, Superman can go dark if Injustice was followed, which Snyder wanted. Listen to me very carefully. Injustice is something that I put in my slate, but injustice is something you've got to earn. You can't do that at the beginning. At the beginning, this is what Cavill said as well. If we were going to have a Superman that was hypnotized by the anti-life equation, first I wanted to see him be, the hopeful Superman. That's what Cavill said. That's what Cavill understands. So, even Henry Cavill, an actor, gets it. You can't just do injustice, first off. Superman has to earn the right to be Superman then. It's like in the older Star Trek, when you had the episode when some alien would turn Captain Kirk evil or something, or have a romantic kind of brainwash where he fancied someone he shouldn't. You know, they built that out, right? They built that out, and they had the right to tell those stories. Basically, Snyder just wanted to jump into Injustice. You can't do that. Callis agreed, mate. Batman is still a non-lethal hero. Batman is hopeful. Never think Batman isn't hopeful. And this is what Matt Reeves did wonderfully. Matt Reeves got it. He took Superman the movie and put it in a Batman film. We had the beautiful love story between him and Selina. Beautiful. We even had kind of a John Williams kind of love theme there as well. And ultimately, he goes from vengeance to becoming a hopeful Batman. This is the message. People go to the cinema to see these characters. Lego Batman does a better version of Batman, for fuck's sake, and I apologize because I love you, Zach, than you did. People don't want, and I know in the end, Batman became his old self at the end of the movie, and that's great, but you took it too far. He's stamping prisoners. He's stamping criminals, mate. He's burning criminals too far. Callis, Superman can't sell his first movie if he's dark. Exactly. Ronnie Dodge, I'm interested in what James and Peter do with Gal's Wonder Woman. Hopefully they force Jenkins to change some things for the third movie. Well, basically, the only way she can, well, she doesn't like being told what to do. That's the problem. If she stays, I'm going to be very doubtful over this new leadership. Short Circuit, yeah, that's right. At least Man of Steel should have been completed before Injustice. Well, here's the thing. Man of Steel isn't as much as a problem as BVS is. Mostly, Man of Steel has some great hopeful moments. You've got Martha and Clark, really good, hopeful relationship. Lois and Clark. I mean, listen, that romance between Clark and Lois in Man of Steel, they don't really take much time on it. You know they can't be bothered for the romance. You know, we remember Reeve and Kidder in Superman the movie, and Donna and Mankiewicz made that the power of that movie. That love story is just thrown at you quickly, and there's nothing there. Not because of chemistry. I think they just didn't work at it, so it doesn't really feel like they earned the right to be in love. Even when they're kissing at the end, you think, even both the actors don't seem to think it's earned because of the way they're portraying it. Ronnie Dodge, I'm seeing the Batman in concert in London. Brilliant. Short Circuit, I mean, Man of Steel trilogy. Ronnie Dodge, the Superman we see at the end of Man of Steel is the hopeful Superman we get in the new DCU. Yeah, and look, this is what I liked at the end of the movie. I mean, listen, the third act is very, very messy at the end of the day. But that moment in the Daily Planet is really good. And you actually think, wow, it's finished at a good point. So there might be some mistakes with the toning, but at least we got to the end bit. And the next movie will fix the problems with the first movie. But then they literally, Batman versus Superman, the analogy of Batman versus Superman is taking your razor and shaving even more against the grain. Callis, also, Patty was so oblivious that she didn't even notice that Wonder Woman rapes a man in her own script. I don't really want to go into this on YouTube, but there is that situation. But there's the quantum leap thing. Bringing back Steve Trevor was a mistake because he had a sacrifice. It's a bit like bringing back Palpatine after Vader killed him in Return of the Jedi. You take away Vader's, what Vader did, Vader's sacrifice. That was all part of Vader's arc, wasn't it? Short Circuit. Actually, they should have developed the relation between Clark and Lois before Death of Superman in BVS. And let me be clear here. Lois is great in Man of Steel. She's pretty good because she's still being Lois Lane in BVS, not so much. But in Zack Snyder's Justice League and in Justice League, she's a whimpering fool. I want my Superman. He's not around. She's acting too weak. She's not being that. You read the comics, you see the animated Death of Superman. Lois Lane is still being strong and she's still being that reporter and she's still trying to work out what's going on. So they dropped the ball on Lois as well. Ronnie Dodge, after seeing Enola Holmes 2, Henry can do humor as well. I know people would hate seeing Superman having humorous moments. Well, there's only one fandom who wouldn't like the humorous moments because in the Superman movie I grew up with, it had humor, but then Superman is screaming to the heavens when Lois dies. So there's everything in Superman the movie. It's called variety. This is what general audiences want, and this is how you win commercially. Like one of the most perfect superhero films of from recent years is Spider-Man No Way Home. It has comedy, it has humor, it's enjoyable, but my God, it's dark in places as well. I mean, we have Peter trying to kill Green Goblin, and that's an amazing, compelling moment. So you can have bits of everything. And obviously, right, Snyder's style, I know Snyder's fans won't agree with this, but commercially, those films, that franchise didn't work for a reason. Ronnie George, I hope James and Peter do indeed bring back Amy if she can't recast her. Short Circuit, I love your live videos. It feels amazing to interact regarding DC. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your love and I appreciate that you enjoy it. And I'm glad that someone out there enjoys what I do. But yeah, it's good. And I'm not going anywhere. I will keep on doing this. 2 live videos a day, a couple of pre-recorded videos a day, 1 or 2 at least, not always 2. I don't want to overstretch myself. But that's what I'm doing on here. And I'm enjoying doing it. It's great. It's a bit of fun. It's a bit of a hobby. And I love it. I'm not here. Listen, it's a lottery ticket to me. If it becomes successful, then great. If it doesn't become successful, I still get to talk to you wonderful people, don't I? It's a bit like what Jack says in Titanic, right? A week ago, I was living under a bridge, and now I'm talking to you fine people. Ronnie Judge, in the DCEU, I hope we have interactions between Diana and Clark in the DCU. Didn't have any in the DCEU. Yeah. It's a bit weird, isn't it? Callus, I'm not saying that you aren't allowed to like Zack Snyder's movies, but we can all agree that ideas like Doomsday and Batman versus Superman were rushed. Listen, I actually like MOS, I like BVS, and I love the Snyder Cut. You can like them and say it's simply, they work as individual movies. They don't work as part of a franchise. That's the problem. It's basically concepts overlapping. That's the problem with Snyder. His heart's in the right place. What he's attempting to do is interesting. It just didn't work in its execution. But in terms of individual films, if they were just independent films on their own and not part of something, and they didn't have the pressure of trying to compete with Marvel, they work on their own as films, I think. But as an arc, as a franchise, as a commercial property, it simply doesn't work. And that's the difference. So you can like them as I do, but you have to be very constructive and admit it didn't work. WB wanted to go toe-to-toe with Disney and create something as huge as they did, and it simply doesn't work. Marvel and Disney don't care about making individual movies, but it's ironic that the one movie that has so many crossovers in Spider-Man No Way Home actually is the best movie they've done in years. That is actually a really good fundamental movie, and it puts Spider-Man probably in the greatest place he's ever been in live action. Ronnie Dodge, I feel Saffron will bring Shazam into the league. Well, that was the plan anyway from Hamada. But as I say, Ronnie, it's very difficult to make predictions. I mean, it's great to make predictions. I make them myself. But the solid predictions are difficult because we don't know how much the old DCEU has to do with the new DCU. It could have something. It could be the same franchise. Could be a different franchise. Nobody freaking knows. Short Circuit, the worst idea was to kill Grayson. Why would you do that without even giving Grayson screen time? Well, as I say, terrible execution. Right, we've got about 6 minutes. Today's DC Universe Daily Live has gone really, really quickly. I hope you enjoyed it. Yes, because we discussed the news last night and there's no developing news right now, I decided to talk about the DCEU and where it went wrong. Because as we're getting something brand new, I thought we'd go back to the DCEU because, of course, we're here with James Gunn and Peter because of what went wrong in the past. Ronnie, in the DCEU needs a Dick Grayson and go for a Nightwing movie. I'd be interested in that. But I think this is the strength of James Gunn. He's going to basically populate this with characters that haven't been dealt with before. That's what James Gunn is really good at. Ronnie Dodge, we know Shazam meets Diana in Fury of the Gods. Oh, yeah, definitely. Short circuit. Just imagine if we get to see Batman Who Laughs. That will be very, very interesting. Listen, there's so many iconic graphic novels that can be adapted. The potential is limitless. And this is what the DCEU failed on. The potential of DC, right? Feig found the potential of Marvel. And, you know, Feig only just scratched the surface. I mean, he's doing Kang the Conqueror. This is why I have a belief that phases 5 and 6 will be much darker and much better. And phase 4 was just a filler phase. Basically, he didn't really want to rush what he's doing. So I think Kang the Conqueror is going to be amazing. And so many multiple versions of him. It's a very ambitious thing to have multiple versions of one villain. And I think Majors is a great actor. And, you know, Feig, look, whatever I say about Feig, whatever I say about the MCU, he's successful because he does have a plan. He does, in his own head, he has a map. And it's very difficult to do what Feig's done because you have to be consistent. You have to remember what you did in one film so you can remember that continuity. What Feig does makes hard work, but if you execute it, it's very exciting and audiences love it. Callus, I want to see The Flash versus Godspeed. I want to see a better actor, a more comic book character, accurate actor playing The Flash, and I want to see some of these great graphic novels too. Short circuit, if DC can just create a universe, everyone will get to see what's the difference between Marvel and DC. Ronnie Dodge, Ronaldo Part 1 interview tonight. I won't be watching it, Ronnie. I have it serious. It's basically a parody, Ronnie. The whole thing's a joke. I'm not taking it seriously. Cristiano is a legend for what he did at Madrid and Manchester United. I'm sorry he lost a child, but you can't come out and talk about your manager, your present manager, your previous manager, and your previous teammate the way he has. And I have lost respect for him. And Ronaldo may have better stats than Eric Cantona, but the way Cantona left was classic and gentlemanly. Short circuit. If DC can just create a universe, everyone will get to see what's the difference between Marvel and DC. And yeah, and they can coexist as well, which is fun for everyone. Ronnie Dodge. No, I've done that. Callus, yeah, I want to see an actual muscular and blonde Barry. Callus, not little scrawny weirdo Ezra. Ronnie Dodge, I'm not watching it. It's about self-serving. Yeah, the only person who wins is Piers Morgan. Kal-El, Cristiano is a big baby. I don't want to insult him. I'm not into insulting people who say and do things that I don't like. But what I would say is still a legend, but Eric Cantona still the king. The way he left, he didn't want to play for another club. He knew the show was over. He wasn't living in the past. He didn't want to be an elite player anymore. He didn't want to do the training anymore. So he quit. He helped us to 4 fucking titles and 2 or 3 FA Cups. Then he left. Ronnie Dodge, did you see the Bruno video tried to blank him? Yeah, that's very odd. And now I think they're trying to, say it's not what it seems. This is all very childish, isn't it? Kal-El, Ronaldinho did the same. Awesome player. Ronaldinho, I mean, look, the classic Brazilians. You can't get Ronaldinho, the proper Ronaldo. There is actually one Ronaldo, and it isn't Ronaldo 7. It's the Brazilian Ronaldo. That's the real fucking Ronaldo, mate. Kal-El, Ronaldinho did the same. Kal-El, he conquered and left. Well, this is why I love Cantona. He said, I don't want to play for another club. Not like Schmeichel or the others did. He said, right, I don't want to play against Manchester United. I love United. They gave me everything. I tried to give them as much as I could. And he did in terms of the league and domestically. Yes, I know he didn't do that well in the Europe. It doesn't matter. The man really helped with the young players. He helped, then he left. And then the next era began straight away. And then we won the treble and other things as well. But without Cantona, none of that happened. So Cantona basically Cantona is your superhero. He was like a superhero who came to our club, helped us, then left. Went like that, then left. And I remember people were crying in the streets of Manchester when Cantona left. People won't be crying when Ronaldo leaves because he's got no soul and he's got no honour. But he's one of the greatest footballers who ever lived. You can't take that away from him just because he's saying stuff we don't like. That doesn't change. But even before he left the last time, we were playing in a Champions League final against Barcelona, Pep's Barcelona, and he didn't want to get injured. He didn't want to try. And if he actually tried and he was half the player, he could have been in that final. We could have actually won it. Messi turned up. He didn't. And that was wrong. So he wants to talk about betrayal. I've got a lot to say about betrayal as well. But I don't want to get into it with him. I don't. You know, I feel bad that he lost his child. But then, you know, my cousin lost his son. His son was stabbed and he crawled to his car and he bled to death. We've all got hard luck tragedies at the end of the day, but nobody cares about mine. Nobody cares about that my cousin. And then in the end, my cousin literally died a few years later of a disease as well. So there's lots of tragedies in the world, right? There's a lot of things that, you know, we could all stand there, right, and say, oh, this bad thing happened to me. Boo-hoo, feel sorry for me, right? It's terrible what happened to his child. But there's working class people without a pot to piss in going through much worse. When I wake up in the morning, right, and I'm upset, I think about the other people. I went shopping one day. I was depressed. There was a child with no arms and no legs in an armchair as she was laughing with her mum. And I'm thinking, Mick, if that little girl can see the brighter side of life, so can I. So next time you're feeling down, think about that little girl without any arms or legs. I'm going to cry in a minute. And she was smiling. And I just couldn't stop looking at her thinking, wow, you're my inspiration, basically. Nothing going on in my life is bad because you've got no arms and no legs. But you know, look how wonderful you are. And, you know, we've all got problems and we can all wallow. But at the end of the day, we've got to be strong because, yes, there's people who are suffering. There's people with mental health disorders and things like that. And those people need help. Of course they do. But at the end of the day, there's people wallowing in everyday problems when they don't have to. And there's people much worse than themselves. Cristiano Ronaldo is pretty close to being a billionaire, I feel. Now, that doesn't make up for losing your child. But, you know, if he wants to do something about that, maybe help other families who have also not got a lot of money, who have also lost what he's lost, instead of going on Piers Morgan, which I'm sure he's getting paid to do when he doesn't even need the fucking money. I don't even know the point of the interview. Ronnie Dodge, Rafael Varane made some comments about an hour ago. He didn't exactly sound happy about it. Well, Rafael Varane, look, if we move away from Varane, let's talk about Harry Maguire, who I think we can all agree probably isn't the greatest of Manchester United players. He was dropped after the second game, but he's always come out and said, I have to fight my way back into the team. His attitude has been perfect. And behind the scenes, Maguire hasn't really been the problem. And do we remember when people were going on Talk Sports saying Ronaldo is the problem and we were all basically getting offended? After all that, it turns out Ronaldo was the problem. Ronnie Dodge, he misread the room saying the fans will back me. Well, it backfired. Yet a few idiots who are like Ronaldo fans, rather United fans, are backing him. But most decent people are not backing him. And so, yeah, there is that. Well, everyone, that's it for the DC Universe Daily Live. We've been talking about what went wrong with the DCEU. Look out for my next pre-recorded video, which is James Gunn is perfect for DC. That will be uploading and being ready for you in the next 2 or 3 hours. I will be back tonight live, of course. Maybe we'll have some developing DC stories and stuff in the entertainment industry in general. Maybe we can get into that, but I will definitely be here after my dinner. Again, I can't give you a time. I'll be here when I'll be here. What has Ronnie said? Let's have a look. Kal-El, I thought Ronaldo wanted to leave, but Man United stopped him to keep him on the bench. Well, that's what the journalist was saying. But Ronaldo's contradicted this by saying United were trying to drive him out the club. So that's interesting, isn't it? Ronnie Dodge, Harry is a gent and not a 37-year-old man-child. I wouldn't be surprised he was the reason he got Ollie and Ralph sacked. Yes, I believe that Ronaldo got Ralph the sack because it's obvious he has the ability to do that. But he hasn't, not even him can get rid of Eric. That's the difference. Kal-El Snyder will return. Kal-El, will you watch the World Cup? Absolutely. I'm a big football fan, Man United fan, as you can see. Yeah, the World Cup is something I have memories of as a child. Mexico 86, Spain 82, Italy 90. Mexico 86 was really my favourite. I remember seeing the great Brazilians. So, yeah, and I think Brazil are going to win the World Cup. And I'd rather, if we can't win it, which I don't think we will, it's not that I don't want England to win it. I just think that it's not a possibility, especially where we're going. And let's just hope everyone who's out there, footballers and fans, are going to be safe, because it's a very, very incendiary atmosphere out there. And, you know, feelings are running high. Kal-El, how did you become a Man United fan? Well, I used to hate football. My brother used to love United, still loves United, loved football. I used to share a room with him. And one day we were playing West Ham and Blackburn were playing Liverpool. We were both going for the league. United lost the league, but it was the passion, them trying to score the goal to win the league, seeing a young Gary Neville win tears. Even though we lost the league, there was something about the club that attracted me to them, and I fell in love with them in defeat. And I've been a fan ever since. Right, everyone. Thank you very much for the comments. If you haven't liked the video, please do. And I will be back tonight. Look out for the video. James Gunn is perfect for DC later on. And I'll see you later. This has been Movies TV Mad with the DC Universe Daily Live. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss this beautiful perfection. And I will see you later. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed today's video. I'll be back later.